Okay, good afternoon, everybody. It's going to be an arrays question. So this is how the GUI will look most of the time. Get just varieties on here. Main thing is an array is there to store more than one value. So it's the same as our data types. It will also be a string or integer or double or any of those data types. But the main thing is with our old variables, you could only store one value into those variables. While with an array, you can actually create, it's a sort of like a variable, but where you can store multiple values into it. So in this first example I want to start with, we want to put in 10 numbers into the array. Now these numbers will start with integer numbers, so we'll assume it's a whole number. So we'll assume it's whole numbers, and then we're gonna do this thing. So initially, before we start, right on top here by your var section where we can create our global variables, we want to create this array. It should be by global because we want to use it in all of our buttons. We want to use that variable. So we'll do it on top by the global part. And it works the same way. So we'll give it a name. Let's call it numbers. And we know it's an array. And now after array, you can actually indicate how many spaces do you want. So we want to start at position 1 and we want to go up until 10. This will give us 10 spaces within that array. You could choose anything you want to in there. You could have gone from 5 to 15 or to 50, and that would create like 46 spaces where you can store values in. Easiest is always to start at 1, then you know the first position is 1 and we want to go to 10. And then you just have to say of and then the data type, which would be integer. Now this 1 to 10, basically what it means is if we wanted to give it specific values, we could say, you can look at it like a street address, and numbers are the street. So you get like President Swart Road number 1, and President Swart Road number 2, and so forth. So we can go numbers, and with arrays you'll always use your square brackets. So numbers 1 would be the first position within that array, and your numbers 2 would be the second position within that array. The nice thing, however, with this, so sort of you could have also said numbers 1 and a numbers 2 and a numbers 3 and so forth of all type integer. That is basically what we've done, but the difference here is these values are fixed to the variables. So you could have created 10 like this. But now the nice thing about an array is we can actually use our for loop to move through it. So if you remember with our for loop, we need our variable for that. So variable I of type integer. And then in our for loop, we can say for I is equal to 1 to 10 because we want to enter 10 numbers. Now what we can do, let's just do a do begin. Now instead of having the fixed values inside, we can go and we can say numbers I. So this will be numbers 1 until it's at the end. Then when I becomes 2, it's numbers 2 and everything, and then numbers 3 and 4 and 5 and so forth. So what this specific button wants to do, we want random numbers between 5 and 50. So for random numbers, we need our randomize. And then inside here, into numbers I, we can put the value a random number. Highest is 50, lowest is 5, always plus 1. On the outside, plus lowest. Plus 1. and that would now create a random number, and for the first instance of this for loop, it would create a random number and put it into numbers 1. Then let's display numbers 1. So in our array display dot lines dot add, we can then display our numbers I. But numbers I is an integer, so we just need to int to string this thing. So what this will do is I will be 1, and then in numbers 1 it's going to put the random number and then display numbers 1. Then I will become 2, so then in numbers 2 it's going to put a random number and then display numbers 2. And then I will become 3. Into numbers 3 it's going to put a random number and then display numbers 3. And that will carry on until 10. So that will get all 10 numbers, all random numbers in that range, put them into the array and then display them. And then because the array was global, we can actually use this in all our other buttons. So our next step, there's another option. So let's say we wanted again 10 numbers, but then between 55 and 90. So exactly the same thing will happen. Okay, we need to again do 10 numbers. That means we need a variable, that means we need our I integer. Because we want 10 numbers, that means we need a for loop. But it's random, so we do our randomize. Remember, randomize must never be in your for loop. Then our for loop, we want to start at position 1. We want to go to position 10. So remember, this will also overwrite the previous ones. Okay, so then in our numbers, at position I, we want to put a random number. Highest is 90, lowest is 55, always plus 1, plus the lowest. That will create a random number. It will put it into numbers at the correct position, and then we just want to display it. So then we can just again display it at that position. Our next one, let's say we wanted the user to enter 10 numbers. So now we want the user to enter 10 numbers. So remember, we want to ask the user to do the same thing 10 times. That means for loop. So for I is an integer. Now for loop, remember, this is not a random numbers now. The user is going to enter them, so we don't need our randomize. When we're done, we're also going to display. So I'm just going to put our display there. And we basically do the same thing. So again, into numbers at position I, we want to put a value. And how do we ask the user for a value? With input box. So input box with its 3 sections. Remember, our input box, however, gives us a string. So we need to just string to int this thing. And we can maybe put a nice messages in there. So this is input. And we want to ask him, please enter a number. And there we can just put a default number, let's say 10. So, okay, let's just see if these 3 buttons work. Okay, so if we do the random numbers, there's 10 of them, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10 of them. And then these ones, I never cleared. We can maybe clear the reach edit just to make that look nice. And then let's ask the user to enter numbers. Let's just enter 10. There's 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 of them. So we'll see if we just go down. They are. Okay, so those buttons work. What we can just do is we can just our redisplay dot clear before each of them. Remember, we can't clear it inside the for loop, otherwise we'll only see the last number, because it will, I'll show you now what it will do. Let's do it with all three of them. So let's say we put it inside here. What this will do, if we trace through this thing, I will be 1, numbers 1 will get a random number, it's going to clear the reach edit, and then display numbers 1, which would be nice. Then it goes back, I becomes 2, then numbers 2 will get a random number, then it's going to clear it again, so numbers 1 will disappear, and then it will display numbers 2. Then it goes up, I becomes 3, numbers 3 get a number, then it clears it again, so numbers 2 is now also gone, and then only display 3. So at the end, we'll just get number 10, clear it, display number 10, and then it's done. So at the end, you'll only see one number. So we don't want to do that. We rather want to display it before, and so it clears, and then we can display all the numbers. Okay, our next step would be, if we wanted 10 random, even 2-digit numbers. So again, we want 10 random numbers. So when you want to do something 10 times, what do we need? We need a for loop. So we need our integer. It's random, so we need our randomize for loop. We start at 1, we know we want 10 numbers. So just to clarify, this for loop goes from 1 to 10 because our array is from positions 1 to 10. So that would do that for us. Then into our array, numbers at position I, because we need it to change, we want to put a random number. So we'll think about that just now. And then before we started this, we needed to just clear our reach edit, and then we wanted to display it again. So we can just copy that, paste it there. Okay, now for this one, we want even numbers and 2-digit. So 2-digit is from 10 to 99. But we want even, so actually 98 is our max. Now, different ways you can do this. One option would be if we just take half of it. So half of 10 is 5, and half of 98 is 49. So now if we say, okay, we take our highest number, which is 49, subtract the lowest, which is 5, always plus 1, on the outside plus the lowest, which is 5, and then this whole thing with just times by 2. Then it will always be an even number. So this is the one way that you could have done it. I don't think majority of you would have thought about that. The other ways you could have done it is numbers I, just get the random number. If we just think 2-digit, lowest 10, highest 98, so random highest minus lowest plus 1 plus lowest on the outside, and then you could have gone with the if our numbers I, and then to see if something was an even number, remember we mod by 2, so that we divide by 2, we look at the remainder, and if the remainder is 0, it's an even number, but we're actually happy with the even number, so we actually want to see if it's an odd number. So if we take our number, we divide it by 2, and the remainder is 1, that means it's an odd number. If we get an odd number, remember 10 is even, so the lowest odd we can get is 11, and the highest odd one we can get is 99. well, 97. So if we get a 97 or a 11, we can then just go and we can just say numbers I should just become whatever numbers I was, subtract 1. Then it will stay an even number. So either way, I'm going to keep the top one. It's a bit shorter. I'm going to put that just in comment, but this could also work, and it would work fine. So now you'll see if we play this thing to just check this one. And we click there. All 2-digit, all even. And then you can check it with all the other options. Always 2 digits, always even. Okay. Then our next step would be if we wanted to change a number. Now to sort and to change and then to delete. Later on we'll get a delete button. For now we're not doing delete because we're staying with 10 numbers. So we can't remove one, then we don't have 10 left anymore. So in this program we're doing now, our start ones, we're just doing now change and search. But both of them are basically a search. The only difference is with the search, we look for the number and then display it. While with the change, we look for the number and then change it. So in both cases, we need to go look for that specific number. Okay. So our first step would be to find out which number are we actually looking for. Which number do we want to change? So we need our variable. And again, we need to go through the whole array. That means we need our for loop variable because we're going to need a for loop to go to check if the first number is the number we're looking for, or the second, or the third, or the fourth, or the fifth, and so forth. And we want to go look for a we want to, let's just say, search for the search number. That will also be an integer actually, so we can make our life easier. Just add it there for our search number. And then this is the change button, so we want to put a new number in its place. Okay, that's fine, we can just do it this way. Okay, so step one, we have to go look for a number. We need to know which one to look for. So to do that, we have to ask the user. So we do our input box with our 3 areas. We remember input box gives us a string, so we need to make it an integer. So our string to int of that number. And now we just need to just ask. So this is going to be a change. And then which number to change. And again, example could be 50. Okay, now we want to go look for that number. So we need our for loop so that we can go through the whole array. We want to check each number at a time until we get the one that we actually want to change. Okay, so now to look for this number, because we need to compare. Is the search number equal to the first one or the second? So to compare, we need our if. So if our search number is equal to our array at position I, so that we can look, is this number equal to the first number? Then I becomes 2. Then is the number we're looking for equal to the second number? Then I becomes 3. Is the search number equal to the third number, fourth, and so forth, carrying throughout the whole thing? Okay, then once we get the one, once the search is equal to that number, it means this number needs to get a new value. So then our numbers at position I needs to get a new value. So we're going to need to do input box, so we ask the user, so string to int, our input box, our 3 sections. Okay, so this is the change button. What is the new number? Example 20. Okay, so let's say we're looking for number 50. Then it's going to go through all 10 numbers, comparing the number 50 to each of them. Once it finds it, it's going to ask the user for a new number, like 20, and put the 20 in the place of where the 50 was. So now the 50 is gone, and the 20 is in its place. So that would happen with that thing. But now remember, at this stage, we haven't displayed anything yet. We just changed the value in the array, which is still inside RAM. So the user can't see the change. So the best to do now with majority of our next buttons, we want to display all the numbers again. Display all numbers again so that we can see the change. So step 1 would be to just clear what's there. Once it's cleared, we want our for loop to just go from 1 to 10 again, because we don't know the position of the one that was changed. And then we just want to display again in our red display the lines. We want to add our integer to a string of our numbers I. That will then just display all the numbers again. So let's quickly see how this works. So you must remember with this button, you have to first put numbers in. So you have to first click one of them. So then let's say we've got the number 24. This number 24 we want to change. So which number do we want to change? We want to change number 24. What do we want to change it to? To 1, 2, 3, 4. And then you'll see our number 24 changed to 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. Then our next step, the search. The search would normally be something like to check if a certain number is inside our array. So again, we need to go through the array. So we need our I integer. And again, we need to know which one to look for. So we need our search variable. So then, step 1, we need to ask which number are we actually looking for. So you'll see we do the same thing we've done with the change. Step 1 would be to do the search with our string to int of our input box. Inside there, this is the search button. Which number to check? Let's choose 50 again as an example. Now we want to go again, we want to go through the whole array. To go through the whole array means for loop. Starting at position 1, going to the last number. In that case, you'll see we'll only need one. Same as the previous one, we didn't actually need the begin and ends. So, but I think it's good principles to always just have the begin and end, just so that you don't forget it. Then we need to look for it. So if our search is equal to our numbers at position I. Now, okay, one way we can do this is we can then go show message. The number is here. Okay, this question could also, okay, let's leave it like this for now. Let's quickly check how this works. You'll see that it's not ideal, and I'll show you why. So we can say the number is here. Just get some random numbers. So let's look at number 14. You can see there's two of them. So if we search for number 14, it's going to say the number is here, and it's going to say it again. So it's a bit irritating, and even for this matter, a lot of times we actually want a message saying that the number is not there. So then most of you would think, okay, but we can just go else show message number is not here. The problem with this is you must remember the display is inside our for loop, which is going to happen 10 times. So what this will actually do I'm going to show you now. When we enter the numbers, let's say we look for the number 34. So let's search number 34. What it will do, I will be 1. So it's going to compare the first one. Is the first one 34? No, it's not here. Is the second one 34? No, it's not here. Is the third one 34? No, it's not here. Is the fourth one here? No, it's not here. Is the fifth one? Yes, it is here. And then 6 is not here, 7, 8, 9, and 10. So it actually compares each number to the one we're looking for, and it displays the message. So this is not actually what we want. The messages we only want to see once. So the best way to do this is the messages should actually be outside of this for loop. But now the problem is our numbers I actually refers to our for loop part. So what we can do, we can still do the if inside, but then we need to have a boolean variable. That I like calling it found. And this is a boolean. Remember, only true or false. We only got 2 values. So with this one, so if search is equal to that number, we can say found is true because we did find the number. But then what we do is just before the for loop, before you start looking at this stage, do you agree? Found at this stage is still false because we haven't found anything yet, because we haven't even started looking. Then when we start looking, once we find it, then only we make it true. So by the end of this for loop, if found is still false, it means it's not found. Only if found is true, it did find it somewhere. So then this if can go, if our found is true, then it means the number is found. But if it's false, then it's not there. Now the message will only be displayed once, and it will actually work good. Then the total. Let's go to total. So for total, we just want to add all the numbers. So adding, that means we want to go through the whole array, that means I, and we want to add them up, so we're going to do a sum. Adding integers together will give us an integer. Before we start looking, remember sum, because it's a local variable, it will get a random value inside it. So we just have to say sum is equal to 0. Just give it a starting value. Then we can do our for loop to go from 1 to the 10 numbers we've got. And then what to do is we can say sum must get whatever sum was plus our numbers I. So what this will do, how this will work, sum is 0, so then I becomes, it will say what is 0 plus the first number and put that into sum, and it ends, and it goes back, so then I is 2. Then it's going to take that new value of sum, add the second number to it, and put that into sum. It goes back, I becomes 3. It adds whatever sum was now plus the third number, add them together, put that into sum. It goes back, it becomes 4. It's going to take the fourth number, add it to whatever sum is now, and give that to sum. So sum will only keep the latest version of it, and every time it runs through, it takes the next number and adds it to sum. And then only thing we need to do, not in the loop because we don't want to display multiple times, we just show message, our message, the sum is, and then we can display sum. Problem is, remember sum is an integer, so our int to string of sum, we save it, we play it, let's see how this thing works. Remember, with all these buttons you first have to put numbers in, then we click total, and there's a total 466 if you add them together. Okay, I'm going to stop at this button. What I want to do, you'll see inside the same link, I've given another program that is very similar. I would like you to do that one also the same as this one was done and see how it goes. If any problems, please send me a WhatsApp and I'll assist you. And then for the rest of the buttons, I'll do that in the next clip. Thank you. Good luck. Bye bye.